Part 19. What is sovereign free will? Everything in the world system is an outpicturing of our own inner landscape. Thus, we can look at the world and see ourselves. The repetitive patterns of the binary godhead that has usurped our reality and is rapidly attempting to co-opt every part of life into its IOTA fusion of AI-DNA-Man-Machine Trans-humanistic reality is a mirroring of that inner landscape. We can use our own insight to see within ourselves, to understand how to walk through that mirror and find ourselves on the other side, as T.S. Eliot poetically penned, quote, "The end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." End quote. In keeping with the maxim in esoteric circles that everything is hidden in plain sight, the clues are all around us. The key, of course, is that they are placed in a myriad of locations in time and space, as well as in many contexts in such a way that a fragmented mind can never see them. They are there to see and be found, but it requires an internal unification of oneself that most are not able or not willing to achieve, at least have not been up until this time. Most prefer the slumber and somnolence of the controlled reality existence they have been programmed to accept, a key element of which is the subjugation of one's will to the seemingly higher will provided by church and state. The programming begins immediately upon birth and is so intricately hardwired into the fabric of our existence that it seems indistinguishable from reality itself. A primary component of this is what we have termed the enemy construct. When we present the concept of the two pillars as a primary symbol and energetic construction through religion, esoteric systems, physical manifestations, and all of its myriad locations, this functions and operates at innumerable levels, layers, and locations in our reality field. It is so endemic that it is virtually invisible, yet it permeates everything. A beginning point to see and understand it within oneself is to look for its manifestations and influences in one's own life. Where do we project our own inner schism and separation into the holographic field of our existence to be externally manifested in a convenient way to avoid the brutal truth of our own internal separation from ourselves? Where do we see an enemy as the cause of our own disquiet and as a projection of our own anger and fear? Where does one shirk true self-responsibility and project the "you owe me" program outside of oneself, waiting for the government or the church or the God to come and save us? These are key questions to ask, and in so doing, by holding these questions within ourselves to magnetize our own understanding and answers to come forth, we begin to understand where the concept of sovereign free will can be understood. Where do we accept our lack of true will as normal and acceptable? Where do we create separation and project blame and responsibility outside of ourselves? Within the context of what is in plain sight, a primary example of this is stated very plainly in the book of Genesis with the first story. There in the garden is a tree with forbidden fruit, and that fruit is from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So what does that really mean? Knowledge means to embody something within oneself and convert it to understanding and through experience into wisdom. If we eat from that fruit, what are we doing? We are partaking of the primary point of splitting our being, polarizing our internal reality and functioning in the manifest world in such a state of separation that creates its own manifestation of good and evil. But then, what is good and evil? Is it simply the abrogation of our own responsibility for our existence, in which we gravitate to what we consider good and are repulsed by what we consider evil, and in some cases the opposite? Have we simply abrogated our sovereign free will and by so doing created an environment of life-negating systems, events, organizations, consciousness, and the rest of it to manifest in the world in such a way as to wreak havoc on all living things and systems of this world? Then blame it on something outside of ourselves and call it evil. Does not evil exist because we fail to act? The Bible says the fall from a state of grace occurred when we ate from that fruit, and yet it continues on for the rest of the book to present what? The knowledge of good and evil. Is it warning us of the fruit that we are forbidden to eat as being hardwired into its content, calling its content Old and New Testaments, as in testimony, as in derived from testes, the genetic life stream of who we are in a collective sense, and then right after that presents the two pillars to hold in a bipolar electrical system to entrain the current of our life streams that is then used to bond, monetize, and control our lives and our capacity to create, to charge and discharge our life force endlessly? Who then is the God and the devil in that scenario? Do we ever stop to investigate the very language we use in such monikers and contemplate the fact that the root of the English word God comes from the German goat, which is pronounced goat? If we answer that in the affirmative, then we should take a look at the symbol and image of the inverted pentagram representing the feminine principle turned upside down, and see that the image used is that of a goat-headed being in a pose that is reproduced over and over again in the iconography of our modern reality. Is God then really a goat, or is the devil then really a god? A god that we have elevated in our consciousness to be synonymous with a city-state laid out with so-called sacred geometry for geomantic purposes to control and entrain our wills through the adoration of God and country as king and priest, with the apotheosis of the so-called father of the country raised to godhead status. This is in fact what is painted on the rotunda ceiling of the District of Columbia Capitol in the city of Washington, the building that establishes the binding legalistic legislation that binds our very souls to a secular liege lord. The city of Washington was designed to overlay the true feminine principle of this planetary body by geomantic magic, by having derived said city from the body of the states Virginia and Maryland in like manner as the overlay of the so-called City of Peace, or Jerusalem. Isn't the city of Washington and all its geometric, telluric geomancy and patriarchal godhead just a repetition of the story of another king-priest, suppressing the feminine upon which the three monotheistic religions of bondage in this world have taken hold in a perpetual drama of war, violence, and political manipulations on a global scale? Have they not simply told us what they are doing, indoctrinated us to project our three-centered capacity to create in physical manifestation and to subjugate our true will into this hologram of endless cycles of destruction, death, violence, and war? Is it not all hidden in plain sight? In the pursuit of what? Salvation, forgiveness, and a fat bank account built on the suffering of billions of souls? Have we simply just taken of the fruit of our own separation and split ourselves into a polarized construct and blamed everything outside of ourselves for our own travails except for ourselves, while waiting for some God to come and fix it for us? Do we ever consider who are the Father and the Lord in the so-called Lord's Prayer? Or that there are literally billions of people on this planet who are intoning the phrase, "Thy will be done and thy kingdom come" every day, all the while never considering or investigating the evolution of all of that, and seeing that the Father being invoked is none other than the Papa in his heavenly domain of Vatican City, the paramount sovereign city-state of the world, and the Lord is the Lord Mayor of the City of London. Do we consider that over and over again we are projecting our true sovereign free will outside of ourselves onto a worldly power that has nothing to do with true divinity, sanctity, compassion, mercy, or grace? Or do we ever stop to look at how we have projected our true technology of life as embodied in these magnificent bodies we hold, with three centers intended to be balanced in the heart, mind, and being, onto the three city-states posited as the sovereign authorities on this planet, where the three become as one, a false one, whereby the metaphoric name Anu then reversed spells Una, which is the feminine one in Latin Romance languages. Can we see this in the three red pentagram stars hovering above the prone and prostrate twin pillars of our existence, and show us all of this in plain sight in the flag of that district, and on the back of the new penny with its three-pointed shield and 13 vertical stripes? On the political and secular level, we are trained to give honor and obeisance to another father, George Washington, in apotheosis on the rotunda dome of the Capitol in Washington, District of Columbia, Father of our country. We pledge our allegiance on an oath of fealty to a foreign power and a foreign flag, even while shouting slogans of patriotism and sending our sons and daughters to fight more foreign wars intended not for freedom and democracy, but for global hegemony, greed, power, dominance, and control. In all of this, then, what is sovereign free will? How do we find it? How do we know we have it when we think we have found it? How do we know whether we have been deluded to think we are free and self-directive when in fact we are not? Ultimately, that is an individual and personal question for each and every one of us to decide. For purposes herein, let us simply define this most important point in broader and general terms. Sovereign free will means taking upon oneself the absolute commitment to embody and live in self-responsibility, to be self-directive, always willing to be self-corrective in true self-honesty, and to be self-generating in all our acts and deeds. How can we be sovereign if we blame something outside of ourselves and do not take full responsibility for this world? How can we have free will if we are not always self-directive with clarity of purpose and intent based on principles of life and equity? How can we be free if we do not take the responsibility to correct our mistakes and heal our wounds? How can we presume to create a new world if we do not find within ourselves the self-generative capacity to create by, with, and through the eternal life stream of creation, of which we are a sovereign yet integral co-creative part? How do we hold program beliefs about all of these things in avoidance of facing ourselves and asking hard questions? Answer the following questions for yourself and discover what true sovereign free will really is. What do I believe in? Where did such beliefs originate? Have I investigated my beliefs to understand their origins? Have I hardwired my identity to the beliefs that I consider sacred and beyond reproach, and thus my identity is in fact my beliefs? Is there a polarity or enemy construct embedded in my beliefs? Have I ever actually investigated from whence such beliefs have been derived, what their origins are, and whether or not they are steeped in the blood of innocence over countless millennia of time, only to be sanctified by a Madison Avenue coterie of self-serving sycophants in service to a mindless system that I have accepted without question? Generally speaking, for most humans, beliefs are accepted as real without question. They are systemized in a manner that effectively short-circuits our actual sovereign free will and are effective in mimicking our will but without the true substance of will. Well, what is the substance of will? It is the directive principle of a being who has rigorously penetrated past the layers of belief systems upon which they previously constructed their personalities, worldviews, and acceptance of reality presented from birth onwards through indoctrinating family, social, education, media, political, historical, religious, and personal systems. An easy way to identify a belief system is to consider its duration and origins. If it has been around for a long time, then it has been systematized into a form to find ready adherence in those who accept it as real. When one operates from well-crafted belief systems, one is allowing oneself to be a conduit of creation as one of millions of virtual reality projecting units, creating a mass hallucination consensus reality upon which lives and societies and nations and this world are displayed and acted upon, all directed from an external power of which the visible layer of the world system is merely the facade that it utilizes to direct and perform its intentions. This is not sovereign free will. This is Blake's mind-forged manacles that, as the essay discussing his poem London points out, the urban grid is an external concrete image of the mind-forged manacles where imaginative vision is transformed into something void of thought. The urban setting is restrictive to the imaginative, according to Blake. As Blake portrays the urban setting, it is full of sorrow and despair and lacking imagination and energy. London is crawling with weakness, with misdirected cries of people who do not know how to express themselves or how to attain a sense of individuality. The person of experience is doomed to carry out a predestined life cycle because he cannot perceive anything further than what his senses tell him. In allowing ourselves to be so used and entrained, we are projecting a reality construct onto the real substance of life and this earth, and operating in an illusory matrix system rather than the real thing. We elevate political and religious systems into divine status that promote the concept that this world is an illusion, which is nothing more than the cleverly packaged precepts discussed earlier of the universal tenet that this is not it, that it is somewhere else, and we only have to follow the law of the priest to earn our way out of this situation to somewhere else that holds the promise of eternal bliss and salvation. This is now cleverly packaged into the legal and monetary systems so that if we follow the rules, accept the beliefs, and conform to the requirements, we will earn enough karma tokens to pay off the gods of the Matrix to be allowed entry into some postulated heaven, where we can finally reunite with ourselves and, as in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, we can merge our Ba with our Ka. But, alas, to achieve this, we must have enough money to pay the priests to perform the posthumous rites and rituals. But there never is enough tokens to go around. So competition, jealousy, zealotry, polarity, dialectics, and all the other modalities of mirroring and separation and enemy engagement are therefore required, whether by political patriotism or religious favoritism. All are just variations of the same old story, all requiring the investment of identity and life force into beliefs with blind acceptance and the trampling over of our fellow man to get to the open chair in a global game of musical chairs fraught with deadly consequences. Counterposed to that seemingly dire prognostication is the real way out, which is inward, within ourselves, to find our true authentic being and our true will. Any process of status correction that does not incorporate the inward journey will not find the inner status of stability, power, authority, and will we are discussing here. Focusing only on the external process, such as executing documents or otherwise, is a false starting point. Focusing on the end goals, such as paying off a mortgage or getting to a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, is nothing more than being blown away by a tornado and carried with Dorothy and Toto to the land of Oz. In the undertaking of claiming one's estate and proving life and standing, the principle of equitable remedy is one that one must come to understand as to what will, purpose, and intent really are. This is the first and foremost step in achieving true sovereignty and aligning with one's sovereign free will. It starts with taking full and absolute responsibility for all that we find within ourselves, no matter how it appears otherwise. This is true self-responsibility and self-directive capacity. It is not willful, angry, belligerent, antagonistic, projecting blame, or polarized. If any of those show up on the inner landscape, then it is surely the case that some form of separation and controlling beliefs are present. The difference between belief and sovereign free will is that the first is dependent on external factors upon which one has wired his or her identity and ego, and the latter is based on full responsibility and directive principle. In the latter, one creates without constraint or complaint. When a being sees oneself as source and truly integrates such perception as true and authentic self, without externalized projection that creates diminished power, authority, or capacity, then that is the beginning of sovereign free will. From this, we can recreate the world, not dispel it as illusion, but we can dispel the illusions of the false precepts upon which we have allowed ourselves to be used up until now. At the same time, any semblance of equivocation or polarization with the external reality as it currently appears will diminish our capacity. This includes, most especially, the allowance of oneself to go into anger at the external reality in believing it has the power to control or limit or harm us, or to stop us from achieving our stated purpose and intent. In the arena of universal law as expressed in equity, expression of will, purpose, and intent is paramount in aligning self with source to therefrom advance a co-creative expression of who we really are and why we are here. The last point, then, is the real corollary question that must be asked. Why are we here? Is it to chase commercial paper to earn a living unto self-annihilation and death whilst our life force is used to build our own prison and eternal bondage? Or is it to take up our true status, standing, and capacity beyond legal, monetary, political, or geopolitical definitions? The answer is, we are here to understand how the system of bondage and control has been constructed. With that knowledge, we can then use our conscious directive principle as sovereign free will to decree and declare who we are and why we are here, and never ask permission. With that internalized capacity and the clarity of our externally established status and standing, we then proceed to act at the level of self-directive choice and responsibility for the healing and restatement of a world that this one was originally designed for and intended to be. We do this because we love life, and with that as our starting point, it matters not what others may say or if they call us mad, because there is always madness in love, but always reason and wisdom in madness. We must know who we are in the midst of the current state of affairs in order to change it. But simply knowing the facts is not enough, because more often than not, such knowledge without action is nothing more than self-congratulatory indolence, as if knowledge is enough. Knowledge with action and directive principle is capacity, and when one is on the other side of the action, one begins to gain wisdom and being. In this context, sovereign free will is the true heart-centered being utilizing the organizational capacities of the mind to formulate constructive action in the real world of substance and form. It is thereby free of the illusions of beliefs and the little mind that is mired in polarity and the projection of the enemy construct in an endless loop of recurrence and impotence. This is why and how, on a quantum energetic level, the collective consciousness has been filled with myths rooted in the castration of the masculine principle and the institutionalized repetition of such in education, politics, and religion, concurrent with the subtle yet ever insidious presumption of the inferiority of the feminine, or the right of the dominator to control and abuse life for its own self-focused purposes. To see it for what it is and give it no force and effect is how we remove our consent and participation from the continual creation and recreation of everything discussed in this document, the purpose of which is to open up new eyes to see, and to begin the process of redirecting ourselves to realize with real eyes, and therewith see a greater reality within which we have always been, but have tarried ever so long in amnesia-filled dreams of insouciance. When our capacity to create is liberated from the shackles of the mind, limiting belief systems, and the world system of bondage, nothing is beyond such capacity. We have all the knowledge, tools, and understanding of how to build a new system that will enable such to be achieved. The real question is then just the simple one: do we have the will? Have we embodied within ourselves the purpose and intent? Have we claimed the unconditional right to utilize our true equities and inheritance to be directed to such purposes? Do we have a clearly defined blueprint with which to build a new world system? These are the questions we must ask ourselves as we undertake the process to disengage from the old reality and sever all attachments and presumptions of consent thereto. Spiritual Courts of Equity. If we have a look around this world and objectively investigate the manner in which the general population has been manipulated with respect to issues of this physical world in contradistinction to matters of the spirit, it is obvious that this is one of the primary methodologies of keeping the people in the herein described containment field. This point is one of the most important, if not the paramount point, pertaining to the Machiavellian principle of divide and conquer by promoting the schism in belief systems between the physical and the spiritual. This then engenders the inculcation of polarity and separation by the systematic and continuous promotion of this form of denial and fragmentation. For many, there is only this world. For others, this world is posited as an illusion, something to be transcended or from which escape is the paramount objective. Many who might consider the concepts presented herein with regards to the level playing field of 3D reality will scoff at the inclusion and references pertaining to multidimensional reality and matters of the spirit. Many who fit into the latter category will insist that any focus or engagement on the world system is beneath them and of no interest or importance whatsoever. In this, those in either such categories are simply being played by a program and technique that is thousands of years old. To those in either camp, we simply say, just consider the possibilities contained herein, and do not reject the integration of both of these camps into a synthesis understanding of the reality we find ourselves in at the present time. From our perspective, based on a lifetime of deep research and personal investigation, there is a requirement to address both sides of the equation if we intend to achieve true freedom, a freedom absolute, in which we regain our true capacities as embodied multidimensional beings here in this physical domain for a purpose and with reason. That being said, as we approach the end of this presentation, it is now incumbent to open up a concept that integrates these two fields of our existence. It is a matter of universal law as we find ourselves here in this particular planetary and solar system reality within a larger context of galactic and universal existence. This principle is stated in the very simple maxim that equity is balance. It is a matter of balance in all things, in all of creation, in all that we have touched in our journey from our inception and source to our current conscious awareness of being here in this present moment, a journey that has no beginning as we might mark it in time and certainly has no end. Source is life, and life is infinitely creative and eternally expressing itself, always in balance, whether we have the perceptual capacity to see that balance or not. Here, now, in this ever-present moment of now, we are awakening from an extremely long slumber of forgetfulness and emerging back to the remembrance of levels of ourselves as we shed the fragments of our long journey in time of exploring separation and polarity. By so doing, we are remembering that we are the present manifestation of our eternal spirits as an expression of Source that has the capacity to return ourselves and this world to balance. Here in this manifest expression of life, in this world, we are remembering that we have been vested with a very unique and extraordinary gift, the gift of life, and the gift of sovereign free will. We are remembering this and shedding the encrusted belief systems that we took upon ourselves in our journey through the amnesiac veils of the containment field in which we find ourselves. We are discarding the belief systems we accepted during the journey that attempted to convince us that we do not have free will and therefore we must subjugate ourselves to some external authority and power for our existence, survival, and salvation. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are discarding the belief systems that we are here in this world as something we must escape from at all costs, that this world is somehow an illusion, not of our responsibility. This is what all the religions and spiritual paths have tried to convince us, that this world itself is evil or sinful or wrong, and the only way out is to bind ourselves to a system of rules and regulations and laws and codes that only the priest and the king can dictate pursuant to some self-proclaimed divine right. Within such a reality, we had to follow in blind obedience if we were to be amongst the chosen ones and of those selected to be saved. Yet we never realized or could see with real eyes that by so binding ourselves to such systems of bondage, in the hopes that we would somehow be free if we obeyed some lifeless, wrathful, vengeful alien god, we would be required to trample over and destroy all who were not so chosen. In this, the rule of the game was earn, steal, or create as many karma tokens possible so as to pay the priests of the law to perform our rites of passage into heaven, never mind how much we destroyed along the way. Or conversely, but equally so, if we only simply ignored everything in this world and allowed some blissfully blinding light to fill us with a false sense of security while ignoring the very real issues manifesting all around us, that this too would achieve the goal of escape and salvation. Others chose neither path and simply lived and acted as if the only thing of matter or importance in all of creation was their own self-focused satisfaction, and thus accepted the law of the priest and the containment field of the king as long as they got theirs. The simple truth of the matter is, if you are in this world, then you are bound to it until you turn around and see from whence you have come and face the self-evident facts of this existence, which is that there is no one coming to save us, no one responsible except ourselves, and no one going to do the heavy lifting unless and until we accept the mantle of responsibility incumbent upon us. We must take the first step or continue the ongoing steps already commenced to clean up this world and return it to a world of balance, equanimity, and abundance for all beings. By so doing, we can and will heal this world and ourselves. In the end, we must all face ourselves to the core of our beings. We must face what we have done and who we have become and choose to heal ourselves and this world. For those who cannot or will not, then the choice will be made for them and karma will show up sooner or later at their front door. So what is this thing called karma? Is it some ultimate scorecard ministered by some wrathful God who sits in judgment at the end of time to tally whether we followed his rules and laws? Or is it simply the universal principle of balance that establishes the fact that what we do and have done throughout all time and space, and beyond time and space, through all dimensions, realities, alternate and parallel universes, and from the inception of our existence, must eventually come into balance? That eventuality can be self-directed, or it can be by the unconscious manifestation of creation returning itself to the universal mandate that it set itself in the beginning. And is that beginning somewhere and sometime elsewhere? Or are we just now awakening to the fact that the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time? Within this context, what then is a spiritual court of equity? What does it provide us within the status, standing, and capacity of a free being who has taken back his or her full authority and power? How does it serve our process when one stands with full intent to take upon oneself the mantle of responsibility that is required to redirect this world back to where it started as a fountain of life and fecundity such as never before been seen? How is this an essential component of regaining our sovereign free will to be fully embodied, directed, and expressed by oneself as a living being clothed in the raiment of this world and standing in equitable alignment with all life in this world, in this galaxy, in this universe? Life in all its infinite variety and beauty and majesty. A spiritual court of equity is one in which a man or woman or child invokes all that they are by having claimed the ancestral estate of their lineal descent in this world and in all worlds and lives that they have ever expressed by and through such invocation brings it all here and now, to be faced, to be cleared, to be healed. This is done by going within oneself and invoking the presence of all beings as part of that ancestral expression to be present with oneself here and now, and by so doing to be centered in one's true divinity as a fully self-empowered unique expression of the source of life from which we have our being and with which we align in co-creative manifestation, free of the shackles of the mind and the limited beliefs and systems of the false reality by which, for a moment in time, we allowed ourselves to be controlled and suppressed. A true court is one in which a sovereign being brings forth the evidentiary body of all pertinent facts in any given matter, one in which said being brings forth his royal retinue, consisting of other sovereign beings standing in life as equals, in which all equitable rights and interests ensuing from life itself are brought forward and tallied for the settlement of all claims, all contracts, all liabilities, all karma, and all imbalances from the beginning of said being's source originated life stream to the present moment of now. We, as the sovereign, are the court. But be forewarned that in so doing, in invoking a spiritual court of equity and bringing forth by one's command all karma to be resolved and all claims to be settled by and through the eternally present equitable living substance of one's being, that one must face oneself to the core and bedrock of one's being. This is where full and absolute self-responsibility comes into play. If one wishes to be free, to claim true sovereign status and standing, to re-embody true capacity, then full responsibility to direct and apply that capacity in this world, here and now and for all time, to be self-directive in absolute sovereign free will, is required. In a spiritual court of equity, true universal equity is present, which is the remedy, resolve, and resolution of all that one has done, touched, and manifested, with the requisite facing of oneself and commitment to be here as life, and to express one's being in equitable standing with all life. When one claims one's full genetic lineage, heritage, DNA, and ancestral equitable estate, life will accelerate the manifestation of that which is no longer in alignment with one's true self, purpose, and intentions. For within these things is the sequestration of that which has not been in balance within oneself, and therefore it will seek that balance both for the self and the higher principle directing self in full expression. It will accelerate healing and resolution, which means that all that was formerly suppressed, ignored, denied, or otherwise will rise to the surface to be faced and to be cleared. We are bound by our contracts, and thus we must come into conscious awareness of what those contracts are. If they are no longer in alignment with what is stated here and who we decree ourselves to be here and now, then they can be rescinded, revoked, and terminated ab initio and nunc pro tunc, to the beginning, and as if they never were. But in so doing, the bills must be paid and solvency regained. Therein lies the rub. Therein lies the hard work. But consider the possibility that we came into this world to do just that. Consider that if you have read this entire document and made it to this final section, then you already know this, and you know why you have come here. You know what work you have contracted to do, and you are here willing to do what is required to get it done. Consider the possibility that we have taken upon ourselves the raiment, the clothing of this realm, in all its dysfunctional inversion of true life, so that we can find deep within ourselves the true power and capacity that we forgot that we had, and dig deep within ourselves to bring that power forth to heal ourselves and thereby heal this world. Consider that what you always thought was wrong with you is exactly what is right with you. You just have to heal the wounds and turn around and face forward to step into the world you wish to create. The inversions of the little self hold the clues and shine a light on the path to freedom. But to be clear, as with the beginning point of discussion in this section, the separation of two worlds and the requirement to address this issue in both means that revocations and rescissions of contracts that we wish to complete and resolve must occur in both realities. Doing spiritual revocations without the concurrent acts of addressing the contracts that bind us in this third-dimensional plane within the world system will not release us from those worldly attachments. By the same token, addressing a third-dimensional process of correcting one's status by rescinding, revoking, and terminating the legal and monetary contracts that bind us here in this reality is not enough. One must address both the seen contracts and the unseen multidimensional contracts as well. By doing this in both realities, we complete and resolve that which requires resolution and settlement, and from that starting point, we move forward into a world of peace and prosperity that we create of our own choosing and our own directive principle. Infinite time loop paradoxes of reality. We are in a layered set of time loop paradox realities in which past, present, future are not as we perceive them in linear sequence. The control matrix of this world understands how to use that system that delimits our awareness of reality in order to entrain our creator capacity to keep reinforcing the illusions of time. This maintains the ability to keep us in the infinite time loops so that we cannot regain our true capacities and power. Many of us are also time travelers who can use the future by seeing its potentiality to change the past in order to convert the present into the ever-present moment of now that we wish to create as the world we live in. But we must bring ourselves here into the game, not seek escape to somewhere else to which we can never arrive if we are still bound to the constraints of our karma here in this realm. Karma is unfulfilled contracts. The only way out is in. We must fulfill the contracts or rescind, revoke, and terminate them if they are unconscionable. This is easy enough to do once we take a stand and use the many tools available to us, including the invocation of spiritual courts of equity. We are walking into the front door of the new world reality backwards because we have always been here, but we have had to project our potential selves into the future to create that which we wish to manifest. But the future is only potential that we must bring here into this dimension and full manifestation. We are coming from the future of our own creation in potentiality in order to transform the past by resolving our karma and bringing ourselves into the present that we wish to gift to ourselves. As we enter the world reality from the future walking backwards into the past, we convert the past ab initio and nunc pro tunc to the beginning as if it never was, which is the resolution of karma. But that future is only potential if we believe it is already a done deal and we simply are going to coast downhill into it while enjoying the afternoon breeze in our hair. We must truly bring ourselves here, into this world, and do the hard work. During the course of linear time, interwoven between the laws of the priests, have been principles and universal maxims that have been brought forth by beings along the timeline so that such maxims and principles could ground in true universal law into this world. These maxims of equity have validity in the multidimensional reality in which we truly exist, which is why we put these at the end of this document with descriptions on an expanded universal level to be read, intoned, and understood for what they are, which are maxims of true universal law and life. We are rapidly undergoing the collapsing of timelines that have fragmented us and prevented us from fully embodying our full soul expressions into the singularity of our progressively expanding standing here in the land of the living as we reclaim our capacities by correcting our status. By doing so, while resolving karma and the imbalances previously allowed, we are negating presumptions of consent to participate in the false matrix where we previously allowed our life force to be subjugated under the laws of the priests. This applies not just to legal and monetary bondage, but to the illusory bondage of the holographic time loop realities we have bought into for many millions of years, years that don't actually exist anyway as time is the illusion, but they do exist as layered timeline loops in which our consciousness and our beingness have been stuck for all that time. It is a process of soul fragment retrieval and integration, retrieving captured pieces of ourselves from all of those timelines and parallel realities, and, by so doing, we will incrementally rebuild our presence here and now. With that presence, standing, and capacities ever increasing, we increase the power within ourselves to create and recreate this reality and heal this world and ourselves. It is an equation of inverse ratios and exponential expansion through being and presence. That is true technology, not the pseudo-projected and externalized control matrix technologies that we have been lost in during many repetitive cycles of recurrence of the illusions of birth, life, and death, and into which we now find ourselves in this end-time manifestation of the AI computer-programmed reality construct, in bondage to externalized technologies that hold out the promise of eternal life, but which, in fact, contain a false promise behind which lies eternal bondage. Sovereign free will is our true capacity in self-directed expression founded upon self-responsibility and requiring the final settlement of the fictional person attached to a legally bonded instrument known as last will and testament that is nothing more than a karmic recycling contract that binds a being to the controlled reincarnation cycle to be returned, rebonded, and used again and again. This is a subjugation of our true will and binding of our multidimensional genetic code to be recycled within the mechanisms of karmic debt as a continuation of the world's system of bondage. But we can take this all back by beginning the journey home, back to where we started, as source expression here and now, knowing it for the first time yet remembering it all, as our genetic lineage is in fact our memory of the journey and of ourselves. The time to choose is upon us. It is a choice between life and death. Final resolution by self-directed decree. The following is a declaration and decree for the rescission, revocation, and termination of any oaths, vows, contracts, agreements, or nexus relationships to fictional bonding, and is provided here as the specific decree of the author as an example for others to use as if it is in full alignment with their own will, purpose, and intentions, or modified as desired for each individual. This can serve as a beginning and foundational declaration for the severing of such attachments, but it is only that, the beginning, and a foundation from which to proceed in one's own self-directed personal journey to freedom from the chains of bondage. I herewith declare by sovereign decree that this is my expressed will to sever all attachments, connections, and binding agreements to any and all points of nexus that have kept me constrained, limited, or controlled by having created hidden, occult, incomplete, or purposefully obscured binding attachments to fictional or quasi-fictional engagements in any and all dimensions, realities, timelines, universes, and parallel or alternate constructs derived therefrom. I hereby declare that it is my sovereign free will, purpose, and intent to issue this decree as my own free will and volitional act. I herewith state that I rescind any and all signatures or energetic attachments to any and all oaths, vows, contracts, agreements, or nexus relationships that were either entered into without full knowledge, awareness, or understanding, or were done in ignorance or lack of capacity in such a manner as to bind me and my soul spirit being to any of such that in this current ever-present moment of now do not serve me or the purposes to which I now direct my life, spirit, energies, and intentions. I further intend that any remaining or residual attachments thereof or therefrom, if requiring conscious awareness and understanding for the purposes of final relief, remedy, or resolution of karmic responsibilities or valid obligations of any kind or nature, shall emerge within my manifest experience and conscious awareness in my current life stream in such a way as to enable me to properly and completely effect such resolution for the proper and satisfactory settlement and extinguishment of such responsibilities or obligations as may be required, to wit, any and all oaths, vows, contracts, agreements, or nexus relationships that do not serve me at this time, in this moment of now, for the purpose and fulfillment of my stated intentions, are hereby revoked and terminated ab initio and nunc pro tunc, while concurrently it is my will, purpose, and intent to settle and satisfy all remaining and proven claims, liabilities, or other imbalances that remain and require such settlement in an equitable, fair, and balanced manner, and to the satisfaction of all related beings, if such are shown and proven to be valid pursuant to any such contracts and agreements that I entered into knowingly and willingly. I call upon all beings with any claims of such to present them to me at their earliest convenience or opportunity, and thereafter I shall seek to achieve equitable settlement according to the maxims of equity and the principles contained therein. That notwithstanding, any and all such contractual obligations shown to be without standing or merit or derived from false pretenses or other methods of fraudulent construction in the inducement or execution thereof shall be considered null and void. By this act, decree, and declaration, it is my sovereign free will intent to be a conduit for myself and all other beings of pure intent in service to life, to effectuate remedy, resolve, and resolution in this planetary world known as Earth, and within the greater solar, galactic, and universal domains within which she exists and has her being, in like manner as expressed herein above, to see true equitable balancing of the realm and healing of the land, air, waters, and seas of this glorious expressed creation in all humble service, never in subjugation or servitude, and always in true freedom. Kenneth Scott.